el audio del micrófono ese, voy yo al micrófono.
Tenemos y después tenés a ver, hello, hi, welcome to the. ¿Me escuchás ahí? Ahí me levanta este audio. Tiene que estar levantando. Nacho, sí, ahí sí. En el vivo está levantando
Dale
el.
tiempo porque es con delay. Dale tiempo.
Ok, son como 20 segundos.
¿Entre imagen y video o entre lo que sucede y lo que pasa? O sea, entre lo que...
No
hay 10 segundos de delay entre video y audio, sino que entre lo que es la realidad y el video.
¿Ahí se escucha?
Justo estaba hablando, pero sí, no te sé testear la calidad, pero se escuchaba que estabas hablando.
Y ahora no, y ahora el audio general. Vos tenés que bajar el micrófono de la
Claro, y ahora meté la música.
y falta la.
¿Y cómo lo vas a manejar?
Allá. Pero ¿sabes dónde? Ahí en el... Yo le dije recién vuelta con la banderita, ¿no?
Ah, listo, sí, sí. Sí, ese cambio para acá con el
Bueno,
PowerPoint.
hacemos los papeles, no, pero ¿dónde vas a poner un papelón? ¿Cómo vas a poner un papel? Yo le decía que entré acá y me vino como una reminiscencia de otras épocas. Sí, no, pero más allá de llenar o no llenar como la cosa de la silla, ¿viste? Bueno, yo quiero decir...
Entonces, ahí el cable no va.
¿Vos conectaste a cómo? ¿La conectamos?
No, y fíjate en la instalación de abajo, pero quiero dejar la mochila. Yo digo...
Saco las dos de acá.
Lloré más que el partido con el alma.
Ya lo sé. Estoy buscando una para hacer los retratos de clase, pero...
Te digo porque,
Bueno,
porque Anita se va a hacer
Un ratito lo hacemos.
el HDMI saca sonido. Mira, no cantemos.
No, perdón, esta es. Necesito lo que sí, si me puedes devolver el HDMI que era este, ¿no? Este sí que estaba, este va acá. El PowerPoint,
Yo lo volví a tocar al
Camlink en el USB. Listo. Era 250. No, 34 y el chabón está diciendo 38. O sea que tres números caga todo. Dice, SIP es el único que vamos a usar para todos los streamers dentro del coso. Todo lo que van a streamar se tiene que conectar directamente ahí y con ese IP. Claro, no, no, saca un solo IP. El IP es como el DNI de cada computadora. Entonces, claro, ya le estaba diciendo flaco, esta arrancó primero, listo.
Dale acá que se me acerca y...
No, buscamos el 8.
8.
Lo llamo y toco lo que hay que tocar.
Y que el único ahora está viendo el video. ¿Cuál es el? Ahí está, ahora voy.
Ok, dale.
Y Agus,
Ahí. A ver, Nacho. Ahí. Esto tiene un switch. No. Avísame cuando se escuche lo que estoy hablando. Levanta audio, no levanta audio. ¿Me escuchás, Nacho? No, no, sí. Hola. 1, 2, 3. Hola. ¿Bien? ¿Va bien? Perfecto. Vos decime cuando dejo de hablar. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Sí, yo te escucho.
Bueno.
Te escucho ya.
Dale, perfecto. Ahí se escucha bien, entonces. Bueno, nadie durmió. Levanten la mano quien quiere café. No, café no, perfecto. Birra, de una, tuki. O bebida blanca, como decíamos ayer, también. Un destornillador. Perfecto. Bueno, vamos a gestionar placer de la mañana. A ver cómo nos sentimos cómodos. ¿Yo sigo hablando? Ah, perfecto, perfecto. Bien. So, I have to speak in English. Uh.
El salón general, este sería el audio para todos. A ver, vamos a ver bien.
yo me voy a meter acá en la cabina y vos, escuchame.
Sí.
Ahí.
Ah.
Hola.
Hola, dame un segundito, estamos
Dale,
probando
tranquila.
que ande todo bien.
Bien, ¿vos?
Pero déjame, si querés, te enchufo esto.
No, no,
Ah.
Ahí ya están las dos cámaras prendidas.
Estamos chequeando que ande todo bien para el stream.
Dale,
Ahí va.
Atención, Nacho, tranquilo.
yo pruebo de acá afuera. ¿No?
Sí, sí, sí.
Y Pocho, ¿cómo se escucha? Me acerco
¿Me
más
escuchás,
al
Faba?
micrófono y me alejo un poco.
¿Escuchás bien ahí?
Ahí. Es muy delicado, ¿eh? Tiene que estar justo.
Yo pasé con cuerda. Ah, entonces,
Bueno,
era la bolsa y ya está.
¿estamos bien?
Nunca se sabe.
A ver si
Perdón, permiso.
Sí, sí.
Voy de ese lado, ¿sí?
Sí, claro.
Paso esto.
¿Llega hasta ahí?
Ahí, a ver, ¿se escucha? ¿No se escucha?
Hola, hola, hola. 1, 2, 3. Probando la traducción. Hola, hola, hola. ¿Me escuchás ahí? Bien. Dale, 1, 2, 3. Probando la traducción simultánea. Canal 4. Hola, hola, hola. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5. Está bueno para un café, ¿no?
Está bueno para un café.
Sí.
Ya dentro
Hola,
de poco
hola, hola.
no deben... Buenas.
¿Hay
No
coffee de
deben
bienvenida?
Y yo creo que debería haber.
Sí, ahora
¿No?
vamos
Para
a
esta
tomar
hora de
un-
la mañana.
Un cafecito. Hernán dice que quiere uno también, ¿no?
Sí,
¿Y
joya.
alguna media luna?
Uf, dos.
Dos medialunas.
Bien.
Che, va a haber,
Promo.
capaz que ahí arriba también va a haber alguno escuchando, ¿no? Ahí arriba, capaz que sí o no. Hola, hola, hola. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Probando la traducción.
Listo.
Perfecto.
Quizás el servicio solidario tiene un papel importante en este momento, pero sobre todo porque es una herramienta de aprendizaje basado en la realidad, simiente de la realidad vivida. Desde el punto de vista pedagógico y didáctico cumple un papel muy importante para la realización de aprendizajes significativos, para un compromiso social de la institución educativa con la comunidad educativa.
acá estoy, Nacho. ¿Ahí me escuchás? ¿Bien? ¿Ahora? Sí. A ver, sigo hablando, ahí tenés que tener levantado. Va a estar la traducción en español, en inglés, para que estén hablando. Ahí sigo hablando a la vez. Acá, hola.
Dale, acomodate, tranquila. No, porque ella te manda directo de allá de la mesa. No ese es el nuestro. Claro, hay un miniclub. No, déjalo así porque me mandan directamente el audio de ellos. El audio de ellos, que se escuche bien. No, pero sí, poner el nuestro.
Enchufarlo ahí, digo.
Sí, enchufar ahí el nuestro.
Pero necesitan dos.
La vincha nuestra tiene dos.
No, pero...
Son dos auriculares.
Dos auriculares.
Sí, ahí tengo auriculares
pero
además.
si sacamos... bueno, no sé.
Sí, hay auriculares.
Yo digo para que tengan
no, pues ya
uno
trajo
solo.
su auricular, ¿ves?
Bueno, si ya lo hicimos.
Sí, déjalo así. Yo se los pongo a él.
Traje nuevitos, necesito un par de sillas, eso, pero
Ahí no te consigo.
no tenemos ninguna luz acá, ¿no?
No.
Bueno.
Este es para el streaming.
Sí, eso ya sé.
Este queda fijo para el streaming.
Sí.
Vos tenés que conectar. Yo te decía,
Sí.
pongo el transmisor acá, lo que pasa es que acá va a comer más la señal.
No,
¿Entendés lo que te digo?
que salgan, no, y aparte cuantos menos cosas, si el
Mejor.
transmisor no lo tocamos, mejor, lo único
Entonces
que nos
vos enchufás tu auricular acá,
Sí.
que es, este tiene dos cables.
Sí.
Creo que es el verde.
Yo tengo este y este, no sé cuál
¿Por
de
qué
los
no
dos
los
será
dos?
mejor para mí.
El que vos tenés, el que te
O sea, esto no es para trabajar,
Mirá,
es para escuchar música,
te va-
pero bueno.
Sí, pero te va a ser mejor este porque no tiene el micrófono. Si vos ya estás con el micrófono mío,
Sí,
que es este,
no, por eso.
vos ya estás con este. Y este
Lo tenemos así en la mano, vos
Claro.
nos decís si hace mucho
Dale, ahora
ruido.
probamos.
Igual si lo hace ruido,
Sí,
o
ahora
sea, ya a
probamos.
esta altura estamos, viste, como que bueno,
Ahora
hagamos
probamos.
lo que podamos.
Te traigo
No
sillas.
sé si está saliendo esto algo.
No.
No.
Te traigo, o puede ser, no sé, te traigo sillas.
Sí, sí.
Acá hay otra, Pau.
Dale, genial.
Avísame cuando estás
Sí,
y hacemos.
sí,
¿Querés?
sí. Sí, me pongo. Dame un segundo, a ver. Corro esto. Hola.
¿Qué hace tanto tiempo?
Ay, estoy muerta de calor.
Hay mucha humedad.
Ay, sí, me siento que me voy
Es que
sacando.
caminaste mucho, ¿no?
No, caminé desde la facultad de ingeniería.
Ah, no, pensé que te habías
No, me tomé el.
no, sí, pero
colectivo.
está...
Está muy
Lo
húmedo,
pisas
sí.
mojado, que
Sí.
yo lo veo al
Ay,
pelo
va a
ya.
llover, va a llover.
No, no va a llover, ya averigüé. Si no, no venía. Bueno, esta es una cabina más cabina, por más que, bueno.
No sé, claro, la de ayer, igual hablé con, no sé si esto está abierto, ¿para qué voy a preguntar si esto está por algún motivo? Porque recién estaba
Es que a
hablando
veces
lo de
lo
la
tienen abierto
cámara.
para...
Por eso.
Ayer nos
entonces-
decían, no, simplemente que se muevan las lucecitas queremos, pero bueno, no transmiten.
¿Este mic que está ahora ya está habilitado? O sea, si nosotros hablamos, ¿escuchan todo lo que decimos?
Bueno.
Y nos avisas cuando salgamos a... Porque ahora recién estamos empezando. No,
Y este chico, el operador, fue un desastre ayer, ¿no sabes?
Sí, espera que le vamos a hablar a... A ver. Si yo lo sostengo así, ¿te hace ruido? Está muy lejos, muy cerca. Hace ruido que tenga más cerca, ahí me escuchas bien. O sea, no tengo problema en acercármelo. Ahí se escucha bien. O sea, y si lo sostengo así con la mano no pasa nada, no le hace interferencias ni nada. Ahí más abajo, ahí.
¿Y por qué sostenemos con la mano?
Porque vamos a tener los auriculares para no ponernos...
Ah, tenés
esto.
razón, sí.
Ahí, espera. Ahí, ¿me escuchas mejor?
Déjame ver.
Lo pusieron... Ayer ellos decían que se escuchaba bajito, pero...
Acá.
Sí.
Hola. Acá. ¿Ves? Ahí está.
Sí, ayer se quejaban de que no oía. Pero bueno,
¿Así?
no lo podemos hacer.
Ellos pusieron el transmisor pegado
Mirá.
ahí.
Ahí.
Ahora
Hola.
afuera. Si nosotros no lo tenemos
¿Así?
acá.
Ah, ok.
Hola. Ahí.
A ver. Ahí estoy
Ahí está
hablando.
perfecto.
Ahí me escuchas bien. Así me pego con los labios, así. Así. Ahí está bien. Bueno, perfecto. Esta es la
Esa
distancia.
distancia.
Sí, más o menos. Sigo hablando. 1, 2, 3, probando. Bueno, te cuento que estoy muerta. ¿Más cerca o más lejos? Más lejos, ahí. Mejor, más cómodo. Ahí estoy bien. Sigo hablando. Bueno, ¿qué puedo contar? Le voy a contar a Claudia mientras
Dale.
que me tomé el colectivo y venía rebasando de gente. Pero bueno, vino a horario, por suerte, porque había leído que había habido paro de colectivos a la noche, pero bueno, por suerte ya estaba levantado, entonces bueno, sigo hablando, me tomé el subte, a pesar de salir de la estación, la primera, vine
también.
parada,
También,
lleno de
preparada.
gente.
Sí.
Hace un mes que no uso el barbijo y a causa del barbijo me estaba muriendo.
Sí.
Y bueno, así que no sé si sigo hablando. Bueno, ahora voy a criticar, a ver, ¿a quién puedo criticar?
A ver.
Voy a criticar a los técnicos que están acá, sí, al operador que nos está escuchando. Voy a criticar estos aparatitos, ¿sí? ¿Se escucha bien? Bueno, ahora acuerdo de no confidencialidad que le tengo que
Ahora
decir algo
todo
a mi
que
amiga.
digamos queda entre vos y yo. Che, es más chica esta sala que la de abajo, sí.
Haceme un favor.
Sí.
Ponete los auris y decime si te escuchás fuerte o bajo.
¿Cuál
Ah,
tengo que
yo te
usar?
traje estos.
Ah.
Están nuevitos,
No,
estrenados.
está bien.
Falta enchuf-
Sí, mejor que
hay que
esto.
enchufarlo ahí.
Ah, acá.
Mirá, te traje unos
Perfecto.
así, o sea, los estrenás vos.
Perfecto. Vamos a
Así de
agarrar
buena
esto.
soy. Yo voy a probar con estos y si no me pongo esos.
Dale. Entonces, esto acá. Ah, pero ahí estamos como queremos. Maravilla.
Bueno, yo ahora estoy escuchando música, pero...
Claro, porque acá no podemos regular, ¿no?
No, pero lo que me dijo
podemos
Fernando,
decir a
claro,
él,
que ayer me dijo que lo de ayer fue medio como salir del paso.
Oh, sí, 3, probando la opción, 3, 4,
yo no oigo nada.
No, por acá no. A ver, no. Sácame la música si puede ser. ¿Me puedes sacar la música?
A ver, ahora lo escucho. Sí, a él lo escucho, pero no me
Ah,
doy
sí.
cuenta si por afuera.
Sí, se escucha
Pero,
muy...
sí.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Sí, está bien.
Escuchar la de afuera, ¿no?
Sí, se escucha como si se escucha. A ver si cierro acá, ¿qué pasa?
Sí, parece que lo escucho.
Llega.
No, que se
Siento que
escucha
lo
como
escucho
estaba de
de
afuera.
afuera,
¿Viste? No lo sentimos nítido, pero bueno, puede pasar que sea por las conexiones, como está.
Sí, como
Para,
que no me doy
porque
cuenta
no es,
si lo escucho por afuera o por
no es
acá.
para interpretación el sonido, para el sonido de sala.
Sí. Hola, 3, 4, 5.
Haremos.
No, yo lo escucho bien.
Claro, lo que
Por ahí-
pasa es que
por
el
ahí-
sonido que ustedes necesitan no es el
Claro,
mismo
no
que
es lo
necesitamos
mismo que cerrar
nosotros.
acá.
Claro, nosotros necesitamos algo aislado totalmente.
Sí, está bien.
Ahí está mejor.
Sí, está bien.
Bueno, sí.
Está bien. Sí,
Bueno,
sí. No es óptimo, pero bueno.
no
No quedamos oscuras.
sí.
Eh,
Que te decía que esta sala es más chica de la de otras veces.
que la de abajo
Sí.
es enorme. Para mí sigue todo para allá.
Sí,
Bueno.
pero otra también.
Bueno.
Me parece más ancha.
Escúchame una cosita. No, bueno, Fernando me dijo que lo bueno es que hoy estábamos acá, entonces le podemos hacer una
tenemos,
seña y
sí,
le
los
decimos
vemos.
subir, bájame el volumen, subir,
Sí,
lo que
ya.
sea.
Ujú.
Bueno, yo traje la computadora para tener acá con las presentaciones porque viste que hay notas y todo. Hoy hay una consecutiva.
Ah, sí, la de...
La de
ah, claro, no
Boyana.
era hoy la de Andy. Es
Mañana,
la de Andy.
Boyana.
Sí, de
¿La leíste?
Ucrania, ¿no?
No, ¿no es la de Bosnia? Croacia. Ucrania es mañana. Salvo que hayan cambiado. ¿Vos imprimiste o te dieron un programa?
No, yo imprimí.
Está bien.
Croacia.
Bueno, Croacia.
Boyana, sí.
Pero no Ucrania, sí, está
No,
bien.
no.
Está bien,
Porque hay
bueno.
una Ucrania mañana. me
Sí,
parece.
Boyana la
Mañana
viste
Ucrania.
que la presentación que
Ay,
tiene
sí,
un
la
par
vi,
de
la puedo-
citas. Te puedes llevar mi compu si querés. Está
No,
todo
porque
ahí.
Sí, sí. No, ¿por
Ah,
qué llevarla?
Sí, se escucha. Ah, no, se escucha. Vení. No, que se escucha muy de sonido
Lo que
de
pasa-
sala, ¿viste?
¿Sabes
O sea,
por qué?
por-
Porque son condensas.
Ya, claro, sí,
Son
está, es
condensan los
otra
micrófonos, se hace como
configuración.
un eco,
por
¿viste?
supuesto, por
Claro,
supuesto.
no nos gusta si íbamos por ahí o por acá, ¿viste?
Claro,
Claro,
pero
pero
no importa. Sí, escuchamos,
Sí,
sí, quédate
sí.
tranquilo.
Listo,
Sí.
yo igual voy a estar ahí
Sí.
con este pibe y voy a estar en
Sí,
la sala.
sí. Y cualquier cosa nos decís si necesitas
Sí,
que hablamos
sí,
más
sí.
fuerte o más lento.
Más o menos
más bajo.
calcularle 5 centímetros
Sí.
el micrófono.
No, más
la
que
boca.
nada el volumen también, ¿viste?
Si te-
Porque...
Lo que pasa es que si te lo pegas a la boca, las heces.
Sí, obvio.
Acá se escucha,
obvio,
explota.
obvio. Y yo
Como
estoy
que
ceseando
bloqueas el
porque
micrófono.
tengo un problema acá en los dientes, así que estoy ceseando bastante últimamente.
No,
Así
yo
que-
para, no es que vos decías.
No,
es
no,
que
igual
cualquiera que se
es
pegue el
verdad.
micrófono a la boca,
No, perfecto.
El soplido que vos emitís directamente hablando, el soplido que uno emite,
Sí.
al micrófono lo explota.
No, perfecto.
Sin documento.
Bueno, y después,
Te lo das encendido. y-
después tenemos que la
contá,
sala,
Más o menos contá con.
yo había entendido en el panel que
es
nos
eso,
toca.
¿viste, Pau?
Sí,
Pero
sí.
yo voy a estar en la sala, yendo
Sí,
y viniendo.
perfecto.
Este, ¿no? El
Sí,
6.
yo había entendido que este vamos a estar acá. Había entendido que había aparatitos
¿Acá?
para todos, sí.
Ah,
O sea, la gente se queda, los ojos
en
se van.
esta sala, sí.
Había entendido que había aparatitos para toda la gente que viniera. Y aparentemente hay 50 aparatitos para todos los extranjeros. Yo le entendí que había 50 para cada una de las salas.
Y entonces en esa, si hay muchos argentinos que hay que hacer consecutiva. Pero son un montón, ¿no?
Sí, es lo que
¿La
yo
mayoría
pensé.
en inglés? ¿O no?
Dos.
Pensé que
De
había-
Paul, el de Paul, que es San Vicente de Paul, y el de la de Bowman, la de Sudáfrica.
Sudáfrica.
Que son, aparte son presentaciones difíciles para hacer en consecutiva, porque no son, viste.
Y entonces.
Y bueno, nada, nos distribuiremos. Yo no quiero hacer consecutiva. Yo te regalo todo, te pago
Tenés
todo lo que haga falta.
Te va a salir caro.
Sí, es que estoy dispuesta a pagar lo que haga falta, porque no, Estoy
me buscás la
muy
presentación
negada.
de
Sí.
Boyana porque no me
Sí,
acuerdo. Yo
estoy
las miré,
muy
pero no me acuerdo.
negada
Porque
con...
no me pensé, esta la tengo que hacer en
No,
contexto.
y
cuando
tengo dos problemas. Tengo el cerebro todavía frito.
Ay, bueno, después
Tengo
ya
el
vamos a
cerebro
tener tiempo para
frito.
charlar
Son
tranquilas,
100,
no
fueron
sé.
100 horas, pero cerebro frito, mal. Y al punto de que llegué, a encontrarme con Alex y Rodrigo, no le podía preguntar al del tren si salía el tren. A ese punto, Rodrigo le preguntó. O sea, no podía. Y después, que estoy muy incómoda con el tema de los dientes. Viste que
¿sí?
yo tengo mordida invertida
Sí.
y se me había... Yo cuando me quedé varada perdí la placa y se me volvió el problema, pero ahora tengo la mordida totalmente invertida, este diente así. Entonces ceseo, me molesta al hablar, me trabo en las palabras, entonces estoy re incómoda. Entonces tengo una combinación de cosas más...
Bueno.
Todo lo de... Más que, bueno, por ejemplo, hoy venía completando una trivia para la fiesta, bueno, ese tipo de cosas, que eso es agradable.
Eso bueno, eso no lo puedes contar como...
No, eso no puedo contarlo como... A ver si tenemos internet acá.
Ayer yo tenía, sí, a ver.
Bueno, mira, acá está la Boyana.
Búscame eso.
Este es el panel. Esto no es Boyana.
Ah, sí, busca Wi-Fi, supuestamente esto.
¿Cuál es? ¿UCA Wi-Fi?
Sí.
¿Y qué más?
No, nada, es libre. La ciudad se
Ah,
llama...
no es Auditorio Juan Pablo. Esta, UCA Wi-Fi
Va.
Plus.
Yo creo que agarré la otra. UCA Wi-Fi.
Ah, UCA Wi-Fi.
Esa vez abierta.
Perfecto, listo. Bueno,
esta es la ¿cómo se llama la ciudad? Rijeka. Ok.
Sí. Y ella habla de Uniri. Uniri es la cosa donde está ella. Mírala tranquila, si querés, tiene notas. Las notas está todo. Si querés vos te las llevas y te lo pones ahí, si querés, si te sirve.
No, va a ser un lío, no, me voy a poner más nerviosa. Claro, es como para ella. Read the quote, make connections with the player. Thanks for the invitation. Okay.
Esta no es touch, pero podés querer subir. No, sí, porque la otra que yo tengo, la más vieja, era touch. Yo
¿Esta es la nueva?
Sí. Cada tanto le hago, ¿viste?
Ahí está.
Bueno, no sé si
bueno, la cita es sencilla, no tiene nada, ningún juego de palabras.
No,
nada.
Pero bueno, qué sé yo.
La autoetnografía.
Sí.
Claro, no, esto le da ideas a ella,
sí.
No que acá dice lo que va a decir.
Pero bueno, léelo porque es importante.
Estudio en Estados Unidos.
Ay, me olvidé el blog y el glosario.
Ay,
el blog donde tengo las palabritas. Le voy a decir a Alex que me mande una fotito.
¿Qué son los premios triple E?
Supongo que sí.
Ay, voy a abrir mientras. Sí, no hace falta. sería primer finalista.
Busqué, runner-up es como el subcampeón, digamos, como el segundo. Eso encontré.
Ah, first runner-up, claro, como los
Como es
concursos de belleza.
Claro,
¿no?
como el segundo lugar, entiendo que es el runner-up.
Claro, como dice first runner-up.
Sí,
claro.
yo pensé que era finalista, pero encontré como que era el subcampeón.
Y
A
ganó el
person
primer
or team
lugar
that finishes second in a race or competition.
Ah, entonces el segundo puesto.
El segundo puesto, sí.
Ujú.
Segundo puesto. Sí.
Y que ganó el primer lugar en el voto popular.
Claro, o sea, sí, la gente lo eligió
Ujú.
y...
¿Cómo decíamos caring relationship? Una
Eh,
relación más...
Solidaria no, de cuidado, ¿no?
Estaba en el glosario, caring, me acuerdo.
Sí. ¿No era solidaria? Solidaria, solidaria, porque
¿Relaciones
era...
más solidarias?
Sí,
Ok.
sí, porque habíamos... veíamos que ellos le decían caring a solidario. Sí.
Ok. Habitus.
Sí, es habitus. Habitus lo
¿por
busqué
qué? ¿Qué
porque es una palabra que significa las predisposiciones.
Ah, porque después está habits.
Sí, sí, ayer busqué todo. Por las dudas lo busqué porque dije si me traicionabas.
Entonces lo puedes hacer.
Sí, podría, pero ¿viste cuando prepare to fail and fail majestically?
por
eso
favor.
es lo mío. El conjunto de esquemas
hábitos.
general a partir de los cuales los sujetos perciben el mundo y actúan, disposiciones socialmente adquiridas que mueven a los individuos a vivir de manera
pero eso es
similar.
hábitus.
Hábitus, sí.
Ok.
Es un concepto de Bourdieu.
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 Y acá engage kids, ¿qué sería?
Comprometidos.
Claro, pero si uno los compromete.
Ah, to
porque
engage,
ves
sí,
que si uno
involucrar, hacer participar.
los engancha, me
sí,
sale, pero
sí,
bueno.
involucrar, diría yo,
Claro, como que
atraer.
si uno los involucra en la escuela primaria,
sí,
seguramente
si vos
van
ya,
a seguir en la
claro, los
secundaria.
haces participar, los involucrás, sí. Sí, es una palabra horrible para nosotros.
Sí. Claro, porque acá la presentación va a estar en la espalda, no es como otras veces que te acordás que había pantallas a los costados que nos podíamos... que podíamos
Sí.
¿Sí?
¿Puedo pasar?
Ah, sí. ¿Necesitas que salgamos?
Necesito dejar sí.
Dale.
Dejo un micrófono más para ustedes
Esto es
No,
peor que la silla.
Esto es terrible.
Eso es un plan B por si pasa algo, tenemos el audio.
Ah,
de ustedes.
no, digo porque nos escuchan de todos lados, ¿viste? Nos
Ah,
sentimos
no,
como en la
este no se
silla.
escucha, este viene la grabación, lo escucho yo después de la semana.
Te vas a aburrir igual, pero bueno.
Yo le digo a Fernando, no, porque por ahí salen la tos y qué sé yo. Me dice, bueno, si querés después los escuchás. No, le digo, me si lo escuchás todo esto después. No puedo.
Aparte escucharse a uno.
Cinta.
Igual tenemos tiempo, pero
llévatela con tenela ahí. Tenela. Si
Sí,
total
por ahí
hay
porque
compu.
no vamos a ver la...
O sea,
Porque
fíjate,
viste que siempre mirábamos al costado y acá no la
fíjate,
vamos a
tenela,
ver.
acostúmbrate a...
Y la abro bien las notas, por si alguna vez se dice, bueno, póngale chiquito.
Sí.
Ya estoy, me pasan la cinta.
Hay
y
un
todo.
agujerito re chiquito.
Ah, por el tiempo se puede... Por el tiempo se puede...
Sí, acordate San Patricio.
7703. Igual esto es al final de la mañana, ¿no?
En la segunda palabra.
Chicas, el toilet.
Mira, y uno por allá. Por el pasillo a la izquierda.
Listo, muchas gracias. Perdón.
Gracias, no, no. Ay, esto es...
Ah, pero está acortado este salón, por eso vos lo
¿No?
ves con poca
Sí.
gente, sí. Espera que le voy a preguntar a Hernán, ¿no?
Sí.
Dale. Estamos bien.
Bueno, voy a quedarme acá porque... Ay, pusieron aleluya. Qué lindo.
Sí. ¿Qué qué?
Eh, ¿Qué buscas? ¿Te puedo ayudar en
No, a
algo?
ver qué es un IRI.
Ah. Ella no es la que hizo la red.
Esta chica, no. Una que estaba siempre en Zoom.
La rubia, es una rubia boyana. Sí, estaba siempre en Zoom.
Sí, ¿no?
Sí.
UNIR es Universidad de Rijeka. UNIR.
Después te cuento de cosas de ayer.
Ay, ayer cuando empezaron. Bueno, y vamos a leerla.
Ay, no puedo creerlo.
No, ¿viste cuando puede estar pasar a 1000? O sea que no te da ni tiempo para armar una. No. Eso te tiene que decir. Vamos a leer esto. Ok, está en todos lados eso. Se busca, se lee.
Sí, porque aparte, bueno, si no tenés que decir el tema general, más o menos lo que van hablando.
Puedes pretender que uno hable igual que en el Evangelio.
No. Nosotros tuvimos una clase sobre las citas de la Biblia.
Sí.
Biblia, latín y Shakespeare.
Sí,
Eran o a la mañana o en la tarde, después de un día más tarde. Tengo ahí las grabaciones para ver un par que no las pude ver, pero... No, lo que te decía es que cuando citan o decís, va a citar y te callas la boca, que es la peor, o sea, es la peor de las opciones, pero es mejor no decir nada, decir cualquier cosa.
Sí.
Por ejemplo, en un poema, en una cita, de ese yo.
No, un poema decimos.
La otra es decir, bueno, el orador cita y habla sobre esto, dar una idea. Otra es hacer como una versión libre tuya, decir, bueno, y la otra es ya traducirlo, o sea,
si tenés el
texto, sí, tal cual es, sí. Hacer tu propia, pero son como, podés hacer eso. Un montón de cosas que nosotros no sabemos de acá, como por ejemplo que cuando hay, yo lo hago en ICANN,
no sabemos de acá,
que no nos enseñan acá. Por ejemplo, en ICANN yo lo tengo que hacer, pero siempre pensé que era algo contrario, claro. Cuando hablan más de una persona, hay que decir que hablan distintas personas. Entonces tenés que decir, por ejemplo, pregunta, respuesta, orador, moderador, embajador, aunque sea esa palabra.
La nota.
Sigo, probando, 1, 2, probando, sonido, suena el mic, ¿no? 1, streaming, anda, llega, seguimos. Uno, hola.
Bueno, vamos a continuar con algunos anuncios prácticos. Queremos darle la bienvenida. Somos Cande y Mariano, quienes vamos a estar acompañándolos y indicándoles las cosas a seguir. Le vamos a pedir a todos los presentes puntualidad para todas las actividades del seminario como una forma de solidaridad con todos.
Como habrán visto, contamos con un sistema de identificadores para cada participante. Les pedimos por favor que los completen con sus datos personales y los tengan a mano, así como el
The
QR
form
que les
with your
permite.
personal data and keep a QR code for being allowed into the building. We have students from all education levels in the audience. Tomorrow, we are going to have a meeting of service-oriented students that will start at 1 p.m. in the reading room in this building, in the mezzanine. So we hope you attend that session. As you know, CLAYSS has an active role in social media, so we are going to share posts over these 2 days and in the next few weeks. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram accounts, and you can find us as CLAYSS Digital. You can also follow us to keep up to date with any information, and you can also post your own photos of the seminar with the hashtag 25seminarioclays, as you can see on the screen. Now we will start, and we will share with you a video with comments by different officials who participated in our seminar in the last 25 years in the field of public policy. And they wanted to join us for this celebration that is starting today.
Los chicos naturalmente tienden a ser solidarios. La educación en la solidaridad es esencial y no hay mejor solidaridad que la que puede hacer una escuela con su par, ¿no?
Bueno, el aprendizaje solidario hoy me parece que es una de las claves en las cuales estamos pensando para adelante la educación, tanto desde el punto de vista didáctico, en términos de todas las competencias que se desarrollan por esta forma de trabajar en equipo a través de un proyecto, como desde el punto de vista de vincularlo a valores, a un proyecto que tiene que ver con la comunidad. Me parece que es un modelo llamado a ser importante en el desarrollo escolar de los próximos años. Ya lo es y lo va a ser todavía más.
Algo que es fundamental para entender aprendizaje en servicio, nunca el chico va a llegar al saber elaborado del docente si primero el docente no llega al saber popular del chico. Ese es el intercambio. Si yo llamo al chico desde mi vereda, si yo llamo a la comunidad desde mi vereda, la van a pisar los camiones, no sabe cruzar sola. Entonces, el trabajo profesional, el trabajo, si uno quiere, mágico, el trabajo fundamental del docente es llegar a la vereda del chico, llegar a la vereda de la comunidad, conocer esa comunidad y cruzar de la mano. Esa es la única forma de llegar al saber elaborado. Pero los docentes, y también, ¿por qué no los padres?, somos aquellos que tenemos una deuda. Si no le dejamos a nuestros chicos el mundo que hubiéramos soñado, le tenemos que dejar con nuestro trabajo a este mundo los chicos que tienen condiciones, y en este caso que tengan los valores solidarios, capaces de cambiar el mundo tan injusto.
Todo este esfuerzo que ustedes hacen, en definitiva tiene sentido si lo ponemos en el marco no solo de un proyecto pedagógico, sino de un proyecto de sociedad. No se trata de un proyecto educativo, sí lo es, pero no es sectorial, no es una propuesta del sector de educación pedagógica en el sentido estrecho de la palabra. Lo es, sí, pero tiene toda su vigencia si la colocamos en el marco más amplio de un proyecto de sociedad, de construcción de sociedades más justas.
En nuestro país, y podría decir en nuestros países, tenemos una rica tradición enciclopedista en torno a la escuela. Y de hecho llegamos a concebirla como un templo del saber. Estoy convencido que el desafío que hoy tenemos es concebirla como un templo del encuentro. El que no vive para servir, no sirve para vivir.
El aprendizaje en servicio y solidario tiene un papel importante en estos momentos, pero sobre todo porque es una herramienta de aprendizaje basado en la realidad, en un conocimiento de la realidad, obliga a las instituciones educativas, a los cuerpos docentes y a las comunidades a mirar hacia afuera, a aprender lo que está sucediendo y a estudiar para ofrecer algo a esa comunidad. Desde el punto de vista pedagógico y didáctico cumple un papel muy importante para la movilización de aprendizajes significativos, para un compromiso social de la institución educativa con la comunidad a la que vive.
El tema de ver empoderados y empoderadas a esas estudiantes, resolviendo, discutiendo, yo creo que es una de las cuestiones centrales de cuando uno piensa a futuro. Es un espacio de creatividad, es un espacio de empoderar, es un espacio donde yo puedo proponer desde el lugar en el que estoy, que creo que es bien interesante de mantener y desarrollar.
Hoy en día, más que nunca, la importancia del aprendizaje de servicio solidario creo que es vital para la vida de la educación. En un seminario de CLAYSS, el participante puede ir con dos actitudes: la de sentarse a escuchar, o una todavía con algunas vueltas más de tuerca, que es ir a buscar una fuente de inspiración y de motivación para seguir trabajando bien en su escuela.
Los aportes que me hicieron participar de los quintos de seminarios de CLAYSS fueron claramente comparar internacionalmente qué es lo que estábamos haciendo nosotros con respecto al resto del mundo. Tomar ideas, compartir problemas y desafíos que plantean la implementación del aprendizaje de servicio en las universidades.
Good morning once again. Now, on behalf of CLAYSS and the Latin American Center for Service Learning and the Department of Education of the Social Sciences School of the Catholic University of Argentina, we would like to welcome you to the 25th International Conference on Service Learning. This conference is organized by CLAYSS and together with the Department of Education of the Catholic University of Argentina. So we would like to thank the contribution of our partners in the Ibero-American Service Learning Network and the Uniservitate program.
Agradecemos la presencia de autoridades,
We
directivos,
want to
docentes,
thank all
jóvenes,
the officials and students,
organizaciones
teachers,
aliadas, público en general,
partnering
y a todas las
organizations,
autoridades
and the
y
general
colegas
public
de
who
todos
have
los
gathered
países que nos
today,
acompañan.
and all the
En esta
representatives
ocasión,
of other
saludamos especialmente al
countries.
licenciado Sebastián
We would
Puglisi,
like
secretario de Educación de Mar del
to
Plata,
welcome
y a
the
Sergio
Secretary of
Rial,
Education
coordinador
from Mar del
Programa
Plata
Nacional de
and
Educación
Sergio
Solidaria.
Rial, who is the coordinator of the National Service Learning program.
Este seminario es organizado por CLAYSS.
This conference is organized by CLAYSS and the Catholic University of Argentina and the Organization of Ibero-American States. We would like to thank all our partners in the service learning network. These are the objectives of this international seminar, to offer training and updated information on service learning for students and teachers at all educational levels. Also to focus on community organizations and civil society organizations to promote the exchange of ideas and experiences among teachers, students, schools, and social organizations working on service-oriented solidarity projects, to coordinate efforts between civil society organizations and the formal education system, to celebrate the continuity of these seminars as part of an innovative pedagogical model that continues to grow. Today and tomorrow we will have well-known speakers both from the country and from other countries. We will also have teachers, students, and representatives of civil society organizations. In this seminar, we have more than 150 foreign representatives coming from all parts of the world.
Nos acompañan en la apertura del 25º Seminario
For the
Internacional del Aprendizaje y
opening
Servicio
session of the 25th seminar, we have the following speakers.
La doctora Liliana Pantano,
Dr. Liliana Pantano, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences of the Catholic University. Dr. Jorge San Martin, President of CLAYSS. We also have a representative of the Ministry of Education, Culture of Argentina, Licenciada Andrea Garcia from the Education Secretariat. We would also like to convey the greetings of Mr. Luis Escaso, who is the director of the OEI office in Buenos Aires. To start with this opening ceremony, we would like the Vice Rector of the Catholic University to address the floor. Before giving the floor to the Vice Rector, I would like to say that we are having this seminar because of the contribution of the Department of Education, but also his office, because they have provided us with support over the last few months, and in his area we have the social commitment division of the Catholic University that have been working on service learning for a long time. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Nieves. I would like to welcome you all to the Catholic University to hold this international conference, and I thought that we could briefly reflect on the opportunities we have ahead of us. St. Paul VI said that development is the new name of peace. And we, in universities, have the possibility of sharing knowledge that enables development. Knowledge that can effect a change not only in doing but also in being. In light of the climate change crisis, now we need to find a new way of relating to one another, a new way of living and relating to nature. Therefore, I believe that universities are the places where we can share with our brothers and sisters and where we can carry out a project to bring peace, fraternity, and unity all over the world. That is why I believe that we are faced with a significant challenge, because we are talking about university in the realm of knowledge, knowing how to do but also knowing how to be. That experience that we can share from our universities to help vulnerable community partners, that is something that stays in the hearts and in the heads and the hands of students, so that later on in their professional lives they can work and continue to live under those values, not only using their profession to make a living, but also to help people and communities develop. And we also give the possibility to our students through this methodology to develop their own personal talents, meaning in life, a transcendental meaning for their entire life, always learning how to serve. So we collaborate with the development of people, of communities, and the world. We are the germ of something new. May the Lord bring to us His Spirit so that we continue to serve and love, and we can help those in need, those who are asking for our help, and also those who are helping us by teaching us values, attitudes that we as university professionals may learn. We can learn from them in this culture of encounter. I hope this will be a fruitful conference, and this will shed some light on it for a new world in a new era. Thank you, Father Gustavo, for your kind words. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Liliana Pantano, the Dean of the School of Social Sciences of the Catholic University. Good morning, dear all. As it has already been said, today and tomorrow, our university will be once again the venue hosting the International Conference on Service Learning organized by CLAYSS. This is a good opportunity for renowned speakers and representatives to meet to talk about service learning. This conference in 2022 is a special event because once again we are coming back to in-person meetings. So we need to celebrate and appreciate this. As we all know, over the last few years, we have faced a cruel, long pandemic that made people sick and killed many others. Work, school lessons, and events, celebrations were suspended. Even the way of saying farewell to our dead or welcoming newborns have changed. This has affected humankind, but also the lives of institutions and individuals. This will leave a significant mark on all of us. And this will affect our individual experience, the way that we have gone through this period, how we have resisted it and overcome it. The Catholic University of Argentina is represented here by the Integration Rector's Office and the School of Social Sciences here. But we were also affected by this process, and we continue to work significantly to ensure that we could continue with the learning process. As Father Bokin said, this process led us to know how to do and mainly know how to be. Part of that engaged academic task is to be once again the venue for this significant conference that is taking place during this week, the week of service learning organized by CLAYSS. This is a space for training, for updating on the methodology of service learning. For those of you who are interested in all different education levels and civil society organizations. Our university, the Vice Rector's Office and the School of Social Sciences support CLAYSS in promoting an international exchange of ideas, reflections, and experiences among those who carry out service learning projects with the goal of serving the public good. As CLAYSS has indicated in its objectives, this event that is quite unique aims at expanding the spaces for collaboration between the civil society and the formal education system for the benefit of educational quality and equity. Very important values. So it aims at reaching all the people who are working on service learning all over the world. That is why being in person and giving continuity in a new way to this conference, as we have clearly seen from this video, where different authorities of Argentina and Uruguay express their support, and we see that Nieves is still very young, and we could tell that from the video. As I was saying, being here in person and giving a renewed continuity to this conference are two milestones that need to be attributed to the authorities here of CLAYSS that contribute to strengthening an innovative pedagogical model that continues to grow and becomes widespread thanks to the conviction of many educators. And all this is happening in the framework of its 25th anniversary. I would like to deeply thank all the people who have contributed in one way or the other, from organizations, those that have traveled far, those that have provided support to organize this conference. I hope that we can have a successful meeting because for sure this will be for the benefit of a community that wants to become stronger through knowledge and through increasingly better good educational practices. So my best wishes for the authorities of CLAYSS, for all the speakers, and for each of you visiting us today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Pantano. Now we're going to pass the floor to Dr. Jorge San Martin, the president of CLAYSS. Good morning. I'm Jorge San Martin. I'm the president of CLAYSS. It's an honor for me to be the president of the civil society organization. And here we are at a new seminar, the 25th seminar. And this time we've been able to combine hugs and technology. For a couple of years now we've been doing this virtually, but there was something missing there, and that was the encounter, the possibility of meeting. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank all of you for the great effort that the CLAYSS team has made to organize this conference. They do it every year in an amazing way, and they conduct this international conference. And now it's more international than ever because we have representatives from all over the world in person and virtually over 1,500 people. These will be a couple of days to share experiences, contents, learnings that I'm sure will result in a better service to the other. Although, well, my appreciation goes also directly to the teachers, directors, community leaders that didn't stop working amid the conflicts and the adversities that went ahead in these difficult times. The Catholic University of Argentina, thank you for giving us this beautiful hall, the John Paul II Hall. Its teachers that give this special framework to this 25th conference. Thank you to the donors and volunteers that every year allow us to organize this conference for free. So a lot of efforts are made in order to organize this event for free. So I want to ask them to keep supporting us and know that every support, no matter how little it is, will be a great help for us. Special anniversaries are special months like 25th conference of CLAYSS, and that's based on 6 actions. Right? CLAYSS has been supporting educational institutions and organizations, training in person and virtually, doing qualitative and quantitative research on service learning by publishing books and materials, dissemination materials, advising organizations, businesses, governments for the implementation of programs, and creating networks. In the materials you have received, you have the contact information for each of these initiatives and the numbers. I can assure you that they have a great impact. And finally, a special word to the Universitate initiative that carries the pedagogy of service learning to Catholic universities from all over the world. It started almost at the beginning of the pandemic, and it has grown virtually and now in person with an amazing impact that will be crowned in October in Rome at the symposium. The winners of the Universitate Award will be there as well, the best practices in the world. Over 200 experiences applied for this first edition of the award. In these final times, if you visited the webpage of CLAYSS, you must have seen that Nieves was sharing many pictures, like giving a testimony of history. We also have a history with Nieves because we've been friends since 1974. I mean, we are almost about to celebrate another big anniversary, 50th. And we've always shared our love for music, and particularly with what then was known as Argentine rock music. So what does that have to do with this conference, you may be wondering? There's a lot of poetry in the lyrics, but also a lot of reality. There's a claim for action, a call for action. There's a call to modify reality. They were even called like protest songs. There was some kind of discomfort among the youth. And Luis Alberto Spinetta in 1997 described this world as a garden of people. And he said, somebody should have kept this garden of people with love. God will never think of it. How will you alleviate the pain in this garden of people? You must have some agreement in your soul. As this was a world that Spinetta, the singer, saw as a garden of people that was neglected, full of inequalities, of confrontations, disencounters, wars. God will never think of acting upon that. That's why he made us free. And then he says, how will you see and alleviate the pain in this garden of people? First, to see and to be
a la velocidad
moved
que vivimos a veces
at the
no
speed
somos
we live
capaces
in.
ni
Sometimes
siquiera
we
de
are
ver.
not even capable of
Y después
seeing,
aliviar
and then
para empezar a
alleviating
sanar.
to start healing.
Algún acuerdo en tu alma
There
tendrás.
must be some agreement
Desde
in
el
your soul.
aprendizaje y servicio solidario
From
nos
service
vinculamos de manera
learning, we are
eficaz
connected
con necesidades
effectively
reales y
with
sentidas de una
actual
comunidad
needs in a
y
community,
no solo para ella.
and not only for
Es
them.
decir,
I mean,
vemos
we
y
see
buscamos cómo
and we
aliviar una
try and see
necesidad,
how to
una
to
carencia,
meet a need,
un dolor,
to alleviate a pain,
o cómo despertar un potencial,
or how
o
to
generar una oportunidad,
generate
o desplegar un
an
talento,
opportunity or
pero
a
siempre
talent,
buscando aliviar
but always
una
trying
carencia.
to alleviate
Quizás consciente o
their pain.
inconscientemente quienes
Perhaps
nos lanzamos a
consciously
esta
or
pedagogía
unconsciously, those of
hemos
us
hecho
in
algún
this
acuerdo en
pedagogy
nuestra
have
alma
made some agreement
para
in our
hacernos
soul
cargo de los
to
pequeños jardines de
account for
gente
those
con los que nos
little
encontramos.
gardens of people that we run
Ojalá sea
across.
el compromiso para quienes
I
hoy
hope
vienen a este
this is
seminario
your
a
engagement
seguir
coming today to
aprendiendo,
this
es
conference,
decir,
to keep
a seguir
learning,
sirviendo.
to keep serving.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctor San Martín. Para finalizar este acto de
Thank you,
apertura,
Dr. San Martin. And finally, we're going to hear to Ms. Alicia Garcia from the Ministry of Education of Argentina. Good morning.
Gracias por
Thank you
permitirnos estar acá
for allowing
compartiendo
us
este
to
momento
be
que lo ha
here, sharing
transformado
this moment
en maravilloso,
that he has just turned
tierno,
into a wonderful moment,
como cada acto solidario
very
que
endearing,
seguramente
as
ustedes
every
hacen
service
en cada
action
lugar
that I'm sure you
y cada
do
día.
in
Cuando
every
el
place,
poeta
every
preguntaba
day.
recién
When the poet was just asking,
cómo hacer
how
para
can,
que haya menos dolor, y decía
what can
primero
we do
mirar
to alleviate the pain?
y después
First, have a
aliviar, se me
look,
ocurría
and
que
then
en el
alleviate.
medio
And I was thinking that in the middle,
tenemos que escuchar,
perhaps we have to
¿no?
listen
Y
as well.
recordaba
And I was
un
remembering
cuento de
that story
ese hombre viejo
from
de
that
oreja verde
old
que le
man,
preguntaban
the green
por qué si
ear,
era tan maduro seguía
that
teniendo una
asked
oreja verde.
why, if he was so mature, he
curiosos,
still had a green
eran
ear.
los únicos
So
que
the
se
kids
atrevían
that
a
were very
preguntarle
curious
por
and
qué
were
era
the only
verde.
ones that dared to
Los
ask why
grandes
he
lo
was
mirábamos
green.
y
The adults
murmurábamos.
looked at him and
Los chicos, los
and
jóvenes,
just
le preguntaron. Y ese hombre viejo de
didn't
oreja
dare
verde
ask.
decía,
And the old man
con
with the
esta
green
oreja
ear said,
verde
with this green
puedo
ear,
escuchar,
I can
puedo
hear.
escuchar
I
el agua
can
del
listen
río
to
que
the
pasa
water
entre
in the
las piedras,
river flowing
puedo
through the
escuchar la
stones,
voz
the
de
rocks.
los que no
I
tienen
can
voz
hear the voice of
en el
those that
mundo,
are
puedo
voiceless
escuchar
in
las
the
hojas
world.
que se
I
caen
can hear the leaves
en la
dropping
tierra, puedo
on the
escuchar
soil.
lo que
I can
muchas veces
hear what
lo
many
cotidiano
times
no nos deja escuchar. Entonces,
routine doesn't allow us to
mirar,
hear.
escuchar,
So it's looking,
aliviar, esa es la tarea,
hearing,
la
and
tarea
alleviating.
que llevan
And that
adelante
is the
miles de
task that
jóvenes y de
thousands
personas
of
solidarias, muchos de los que están
young
hoy
people
acá y a los
and
que les
many
doy
of you
los
here
buenos días y
do.
le agradezco
And I
habernos
thank you all for
recibido.
having welcomed
Traigo
us here.
el saludo
I bring the greetings
afectuoso del ministro
of
Jaime
the
Pasic.
minister, Jaime Pasic.
Traigo el
I
compromiso
also bring
de
here
retomar
the
en este
commitment
encuentro esta posibilidad
of
de
resuming
volver a vernos después de la
these
pandemia,
meetings
de
after the
reencontrarnos en
pandemic.
un camino que no
And
nos estuvimos alejados,
I mean,
sino que
we've never
estuvimos
deviated
separados
from this
porque la
path. We've just
enfermedad,
been
porque
separated
estar
from one another because of the
protegiéndonos
pandemic
de la
and
salud evitó
the fact that we had to
muchísimas acciones.
protect
Lo
our
que no
health,
evitó y lo que no
avoided many
detuvo
other actions,
fue la
but it
acción
didn't
solidaria.
stop
De
these
muchísimos
service
argentinos,
actions
y
of
yo acá quisiera
many Argentinians. And here I would like
celebrar y
to
reivindicar en este
celebrate in
seminario
this conference
el accionar de los jóvenes.
the action of the youth,
Los jóvenes universitarios que en el
university
voluntariado,
students,
como
that
recién
through
mencionaba,
volunteering, as we've just
dieron
heard,
muestras
they
de que la patria se construye y se
they
reconstruye
confirm
en
that
cada
the
crisis.
country is built
cuando
and
estamos
rebuilt
juntos.
in every
Pudimos ver en
crisis
las
when we are
universidades
together.
cientos
At
de
universities,
jóvenes en
we're able to
centros
see
de
hundreds of
llamados
students
y de
at the
rastreo,
call centers,
voluntariamente horas
at
y
the
horas del día
contact
hablando con
tracking
aquellas personas
centers,
que estaban solas
speaking
y
to
que
those
podían
people
ser
that were
contactos
alone
estrechos
that
de
might
COVID.
be close
Vimos miles de
contacts of
jóvenes
COVID.
en los territorios con el programa
We saw
Ciudad.
thousands of youth
Otros
people
en
in the
proyectos de
provinces with
identificación.
other
Escuelas que
programs,
abrían con
schools schools that opened their labs for the community to have the sanitizers that the market sometimes did not allow us to have. Schools that with their teachers and with their families and associations of parents distributed food among those that could not afford it because they had lost their jobs,
o el dolor
or
de la
because
pérdida de un
the
familiar,
disease of the pain
asuntos
of
habían
losing a
estado
loved one
fuera de la
had
posibilidad de acceder.
deprived them
También
from the
quiero
possibility of
reivindicar lo que
having
haremos
access.
acá en este
And
momento y les
here
pedimos a
I would
ustedes que
like
nos ayuden a reivindicar
to
a
help
cientos de
us
jóvenes de los
also
secundarios
celebrate those
que
hundreds of
aceptaron y
students at
tomaron la
secondary
convocatoria del
schools
ministerio
that
en
accepted the
septiembre del
call
año
from the
pasado
ministry
de
in
salir a
September
buscar
last year
a cada uno de los
to
estudiantes
go
secundarios
out
que estaban en su
and try
casa
to find
y
those
que no
high school
volvían después de
students
la
that were in
pandemia
their schools that
porque
did
habían
not
salido a
return to
trabajar
school after the
para
pandemic
colaborar y
because perhaps
contribuir
they had to
a la
work
economía
to
familiar,
contribute to the
porque los había
family income,
atravesado alguna
or because
dificultad
they had some
por el
difficulties
dolor o la
because
angustia
of
de
the
la propia
pain
adolescencia y de la
and all the
propia
conflicts that
enfermedad,
every
o
adolescent
porque
goes
no
through,
encontraban
or
en
because
la
they
escuela o no veían
at
en la
school
escuela
they did
el
not
lugar de la
find the
oportunidad.
place
Bueno,
of
cientos de jóvenes
opportunity. So
con
hundreds
sus
of
escuelas, con
students
sus
with their
docentes, con
schools,
sus
with their
organizaciones
teachers, with
cooperadoras,
their
nos ayudaron
parents
a buscar
associations
a cada
helped
uno de
us
esos jóvenes
find
que no estaban.
those students that
Más de
had
1 millón
fallen
de jóvenes
out of the
volvieron a la
system.
escuela.
More than 1 million
Jóvenes que
students
llegaron
returned
otra
to
vez
school.
a la escuela secundaria
Students that
para que esa
came
sea
back to secondary
su
school for
posibilidad.
that to be
En
their
lugar que me tocó
possibility.
ocupar
In
en el
my
Ministerio de
position
Educación,
at the Ministry of
intenta
Education,
construir un sistema de
we
becas
tried
en
to
nuestro
build a
ministerio,
system
muchas
of
becas.
grants. There were many
Becas
grants in our
Progresar,
ministry.
becas
They are
Belgrano,
called
becas
Progresar, Belgrano,
socioeducativas,
social
gran
educational grants, a
intentando
high number of
construir un
grants.
sistema.
We're trying to
Intentando
build a system.
conocerlos,
We're
escucharlos,
trying to get to know them and listen
Hoy
to
hay
them
más
and
de
see in them.
1.600.000
Now
jóvenes
there's
que
more than
están en las
1.6
escuelas,
million
que
students
asisten
at
a las
schools
escuelas
that
acompañados
go to
por este
schools
brazo solidario del
supported by
Estado
this
a través del sistema de becas,
solidarity
pero
of the government through the
muchísimos de ellos
grants.
además
But many of them
trabajan en
also
actividades
work
compartidas.
on
La escuela
shared
y el
activities.
Ministerio de Educación
The school and the
promueve
Ministry of
la
Education
enseñanza,
promote
promueve poner,
teaching, promote
poner los contenidos curriculares a disposición de la comunidad.
making the
Y
curricula
esa
available
enseñanza
and at the
en
service
solidaridad
of the
como
community.
nos encontramos.
And
Esos
that's what
jóvenes
we are
que
doing.
volvieron a la
Those
escuela,
young
que
students that return
fuimos
to
a
school,
buscar, están dispuestos
that we
a
went to their
trabajar
homes to
también por
make
nosotros,
them come
porque
back
la
to school, are
solidaridad
also willing to
no es
work
un
for
acto
us because
inmediato,
solidarity is not an
ni una
immediate
idea,
act
es
or
un
an
modo de
idea.
vida.
It's a
Modo de vida que algunos
lifestyle.
construimos y que
A
la
lifestyle that
institución
some of us
promueve,
build
que
and that the
seguramente los que
institution
están acá
promotes. And I'm sure
son
that all of
artífices
you
de esas
are also
oportunidades, de esos
makers
modos
of those
de
opportunities,
acompañar a
of
otros para ser
supporting
un país mejor.
others
Me parece
to
que la
make this a
Argentina
better country. I think
requiere
Argentina
darse una nueva oportunidad.
needs a new
Los argentinos
opportunity.
merecemos
We
otra
Argentinians
vez, ahora que
deserve
nos
again,
encontramos, nos miramos,
now
nos
that
escuchamos,
we are together
podemos
again face to
avanzar,
face,
estar juntos en
we
este camino
need to be together
que nos dé una
along
nueva
this path
oportunidad
to have
ciudadana. Los
a
jóvenes tienen
new
ahí
opportunity as
un lugar
citizens.
especial.
And the youth
Los
have a
jóvenes
special place
son
there.
los que
The
nos
youth are the
interpelan
ones that
y
challenge
los que
us
sin
and the
cancelación,
ones
sin
that
discriminación,
without
con un
discrimination,
sentido y una
with
perspectiva amplia
a
de
wide
género, de mirada
perspective,
al
a
universo,
gender
nos
perspective
tienen
and a
que
diversity
mostrar
perspective,
cuál es
they
el
have to
recorrido
show us
que nos
the
podrá hacer a
path
todos
ahead
un poco más felices,
that will make us
un poco más
a little
justos,
happier,
un
fairer,
poco más solidarios.
and
Así que agradezco
more caring. So I thank you for this invitation. Congratulations to the leaders of the institution that even through hard political times and the pandemic, they've promoted solidarity, and they promote it because they are convinced. They promote it because it's absolutely necessary. Thank you. I invite you to make another round of applause to those that have opened this conference. Thank them for their presence, for their support, for their words. Now,
vamos a desarrollar la ponencia celebrando las bodas de plata.
we are going to celebrate the silver anniversary of the International Conference Roots and Perspectives by Maria Nieves Tapia, who is the director of CLAYSS, and this will be moderated by Andrés Peregali.
Queremos invitarlos
We would like to invite you
a poder escuchar con atención y para
to
una
listen,
atenta escucha
and for
solicitarles
that
que sus
we
dispositivos
will
electrónicos,
ask you
celulares,
to please
estén en
mute your
silencio
mobile devices
para poder prestar
so that we
atención
can pay
y no generar
full
distracción.
attention
Ya, muchas
and
gracias.
we avoid distractions. Thank you.
Bueno, buenos días nuevamente a todos. Como
Good morning once again to you all. As it has been said, now we will have the pleasure, the joy, the honor, the inspiration of listening to Maria Nieves Tapia in this opening session that is titled Celebrating the Silver Jubilee of the International Conference Roots and Perspectives. She is the director of the Center for the Latin American Center for Service Learning. She started coordinating the service learning programs at the Ministry of Education in Argentina. She is authored of numerous papers and books in different languages, and she has been awarded different prizes at the national and international level. She's a founding member of the International Association of Service Learning Research, and she is member of the Ibero-American Service Learning Network. In 2019, she was appointed member of ACES, the International Academy on Studies on Social Commitment. She leads a diploma program in CLAYSS, the OEI, and the Scalabrini Ortiz University. So now I'll give the floor to Maria Nieves. Please remember that in your binders you have received some notes where you can write your questions. Later on, we are going to collect the questions in order to relay them to Nieves. We will also gather questions from YouTube. We are going to select a few of them. So, Maria Nieves, you hold the floor. Thank you, Andrés. Good morning to you all. Hello. I'm very happy to see you again in person, to be able to see all your faces here, to see a full hall here. Let me make a confession here, because we are among friends. We have asked the university for the largest room in February. First of all, because we were afraid that we would have to maintain social distancing if the pandemic would be reactivated. But later on, we started to feel afraid, worried that perhaps now with the new normal, with all the virtual sessions over YouTube, that we might not fill the room. This morning we were trying to convince ourselves that we would be happy because we would be back in person, but really we are very happy because we have a full house today and we are all together once again. So thank you for being here. 25 years have gone by. 25 years ago, we were closing the first seminar, the first conference in a public school, Lenguas Vivas, that is a traditional one. We had 172 participants at the peak of the conference. Today we have more than 1,200 if we count those viewing us through YouTube. And at that time, the seminar, the conference, was not called International Conference because we have 7 speakers from abroad that were just coming to tell us about service learning to a small group of teachers. These teachers were already already practicing service learning, but they didn't know that that was the name. And a group at the ministry were trying to promote that. I see now Eduardo Tasca, who is part of the management committee of CLAYSS, but at that time he was a principal at the Carlos Pellegrini School, a school that had established mandatory service related activities before knowing that the name was service learning. This is a picture that we took in 2019 when nobody thought that the next two conferences would be held virtually. Over the years, we have had more than 15,000 participants without counting the current year, and more than 8,000 virtual participants in the last 2 years in the virtual format. We would have never imagined 25 years ago that a small conference, a small seminar organized by the Ministry of Education with all the red tape that exists would be celebrating its 25th anniversary. So against all odds, 25 years later, we are not only holding these conferences, but we are also promoting service learning from the National Ministry of Education. Sergio Rial is here sitting at the front row. He is currently the coordinator of service learning program at the ministry level. And he participated in that first seminar representing the voice of young people. He had long hair at the time, and Sergio represented and brought to us the voice of youth in that first seminar where we had these important speakers. So we are celebrating 25 years of an innovation. In Argentina and in other countries, this innovation started first in schools, in universities, in other countries, and now has become an educational policy. As we have seen in the video, there are former ministers who talked about service learning in those in that video. As one of the speakers from the second seminar said, this is the only educational tool that is first identified by teachers and students. So in this seminar, in this conference, we will have the opportunity to listen to a lot of service-oriented students and teachers. We are celebrating 25 years of promotion of educational policies around service learning. Argentine teachers may remember the sadly basic contents of the school curricula in the 1990s. One of the things that we inherited from those days is service learning, and over the years there have been new policies established, such as the presidential awards, the National Service Learning Program. And in Argentina, service learning is guaranteed by the National Education Act, so that all educational institutions can carry out service learning projects within the framework of their educational projects. We also have agreements at the federal level with the support of the government. But along the way, we have had times of joy and, as is usually the case in politics, some unpleasant moments. And we have had some ups and downs. Some of us may relate to this photograph. This was a dramatic moment in our country, the crisis in 2001. In December of 2001, we had one of the most severe social and economic crises in the country. And educational policies were negatively affected. Perhaps some of you remember that we symbolically embraced the ministry because there were proposals to close the Ministry of Education. Well, actually the ministry was not closed, but a significant number of officials were invited to leave. Among those were those of us who coordinated service learning activities. So in February 2002, we gathered in the living room in my home with my husband, my sister, some friends that are still here with us in the room, and we decided to do like our famous character of the cartoons, Mafalda, does. We are going to save the world. So ridiculously, we said, well, if we cannot keep on working for the ministry, for the benefit of Argentine schools, we are going to work for Latin America. So on February 26th, in 2002, we decided to found the Latin American Center for Service Learning. Well, but it turns out that sometimes dreams become a reality, and a few days later we received calls from Uruguay, from Chile, from Bolivia, and we started to work without having an office, without having a budget, with all the bank restrictions to take out our money, and we started working on service learning. In February, we celebrated 20 years of existence, and I can hardly believe it. If I had been told that we were going to have such a wonderful team, a Spanish colleague says that she thought that we had a whole building of offices, that there was a larger team. No, that was not the case. But this is the CLAYSS team. I want to thank them all. In your binders, you have also received information on the fruits ripened over the years. Sometimes the information or the pictures do not really tell about the joy and the privilege we have felt for working with thousands of students and teachers from all parts of the world. If somebody had told me that all the countries that are represented here with all these flags at the head table would mean that we would have representatives from the Philippines, from Singapore, from Kenya, from Eastern Europe, from all over Europe, the United States, from all Latin America, together here celebrating this anniversary. If I had been told that 20 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. And I think that this is a reason to celebrate the fact that we are together, not just as a community of Argentinians, but as a truly global community. I'm not talking about that standard globalization where everybody sings the same songs and uses the same words. It's a globalization where each of us have found our own style of doing service learning, our own style of carrying out projects. This is a time of celebration, and we hope that we can continue with this spirit throughout the conference. Those of us who have been attending these conferences, you know that I always take 5 minutes to explain what service learning is about for newcomers. But this time, I decided to gather the lessons learned over these 25 years. I think this can be useful for newcomers as well as for those who are old friends and have been here with us from the very first day. So I'm going to use an experience from a faraway country, our colleagues from the Assam Don Bosco University in India. I don't know if our colleague is here. Please stand up. She has traveled many miles in order to be able to come to Buenos Aires. Among the many wonderful experiences that we find in India, the students of nanotechnology, and you will have to explain to me what the curriculum is about because I'm a teacher of history. So these students analyzed how to use nanotechnology to offer water purification systems for the wells used in the villages, because for centuries they have been consuming contaminated water. So with nanotechnology and solar panels, they can have sustainable provision of drinking water to many communities. I think this is an excellent example of service learning, because in this experience we have the same academic content, the same professional competencies, the same knowledge and development offered by project-based methodologies and others, all the things that a good university or a good school can provide, but it has an additional component, and that is that students are the true leaders in these experiences, because they are not just doing the homework from university or from school. They are now identifying problems that are unexpected, and they are solving those problems on site. This is a second characteristic. We are not learning in a lab. We are not learning in a protected space. We are not working with scale models. We are actually going into the reality on the ground to deal with those experiences and to implement our competencies in real situations. And this has a significant impact on the community. We cannot always measure that impact. Sometimes we go to a community and then we leave after some time. But when you go back years later, you find that there is prosperity, that the whole community has bloomed as a result of the project carried out by those students. Perhaps if you are a newcomer, you may say, well, this can be easy for a university person who has a lot of technologies and resources available. But we know that already in kindergarten we have wonderful experiences with 4-year-olds that can have a significant impact on their communities. So I decided to share this experience with you, because in an area where we talk so much about inclusion and there is so little practice of inclusion, this experience is from Mendoza, from a primary school, and they found that they had some blind students, and even though schools can make significant efforts, they are not truly prepared to fully include these students. Of course, they have teachers, they have assistants and strategies in place, but they realize that the blind schoolmates could not read the same books, they could not share the reading material they were using. So these are 4th and 5th graders who learned how to write in Braille in order to offer reading materials to their blind classmates so that they could all read the same material. And this had an impact not only in terms of the inclusion of the blind students, but also in the learning of all the students in the class, because they couldn't have spelling mistakes in addition to learning how to write Braille. If I remember my children in the primary school and all the spelling mistakes they made, I really envy, in a good way, the students of the school. Why? Because they put their learning to the service of these other schoolmates. They learn much better than if they had studied just to pass an exam. And this is what we are talking about when we talk about service learning. This passion, this need to go out into the community and also offer quality education to all. As Mrs. Pantano said, all of us have been affected by the pandemic, and all of us have dealt with the challenge of the pandemic. And there was a point when we wondered whether it was possible to continue doing service learning. Perhaps we have to hibernate until the pandemic was over. And the truth is that we discovered that creativity, ingenuity, the passion for service would continue. And we realized that we could say, well, we can have a map in order to see if during the pandemic there were some projects being carried out, and all of a sudden we saw 200 projects reflected on that map from all parts of the world. This is a project from one among many other experiences, and I chose this one because it is a clear example of the path we followed. This is a program that is called Barriadas. It's a program that for almost 20 years has been carried out by a university in the province of Buenos Aires. Students of subjects related to teaching worked during the weekends with their own teachers to offer tutoring to children and teenagers that sometimes have no one at home to help them with their homework. So they were providing help in community centers, in public libraries. When the pandemic broke out, the libraries and the community centers were shut down, so nobody could go out of their houses. So they have to find a creative way to continue with these lessons with students and teenagers. In some cases, they use the mobile phones. In others, they use the computers. Sometimes they have to borrow some tools, and they spent a whole year providing tutoring in a virtual format so that children and teenagers would not stop receiving that kind of support. And then in 2021, when we were still hesitating whether we could go out or not, whether we could do without our face masks, they introduced a hybrid model. Some students connected remotely and others were there in person. I looked at their Facebook page, and for the last 4 months they have gone back to fully in-person lessons, but they learned a lot over the pandemic, and they kept on this contact with their students. The truth is that there are many educators, there are many students that do service learning, although they don't know that at the international level, that is the name it receives. We have seen experiences from all over the world. We have seen hundreds of definitions for service learning from many authors all over the world. But we can identify the service learning experience when it has these 3 components. This is just like going to the pharmacy and say, well, I don't have this medication, but I can give you the same drug under a different brand name. This is like the generic. The generic for service learning needs to have these 3 components. There is an action, an initiative, a service that is going to be provided. In English, they talk about service learning. In Spanish, we added the term solidarity because in Latin America, sometimes we have some help that can make you feel bad, and not always the services are based on solidarity, on caring. So we have to make sure that we have caring service here, even if it is a short action, but this is an action that is effective in addressing real needs, not the needs that the school thinks that the community has. There is a listening process that needs to happen. We work with the community, not just for the community. And it is there where we can find that solidarity element. The second essential component is the active leadership of students. There is a lot of solidarity. There are groups of parents or groups of teachers that are organized to extend solidarity, but they are not learning from one another. Our students learn from one another because they take ownership of the project and they get involved in person. I love students when they say our project, and it is true, it is their own project. And the third component, the third characteristic, has to do with our leading role as educators. As Dewey said in the early 20th century, you learn from experiences, but not all experiences are equally educational. And we are the ones who have to make sure that the experience is truly educational. We are the ones who have to make sure that we can connect the needs of the community with the curricular content, what kind of reflection we need to include so that there is some reflection, how we can help them developing their competencies for citizenship, the soft and hard skills, what kind of research we need to do in order to make sure that we are doing the right thing and that we are not just going to provide the community with anything we think of. The best service learning projects are very serious projects. They are projects that can lead to university research projects and that should be reflected or turned into academic papers in well-known journals that should be presented in specialized congresses. I love it when I see the vets in Argentina and in Chile who treat the horses of the carbon collectors, of the urban recyclers, end up presented in veterinary congresses their papers based on their experiences with those horses. Or a member of CONI said, like Argentini, with years of experience, talking about how to build and provide affordable housing. We learn a lot from communities on the ground, and a good service learning project is not just a caring project. It is done seriously, it transforms reality, and it generates new knowledge.
And considering these three characteristics, and now also remembering Master Pestalozzi that used to say that the authentic education should involve the head, the heart, and the hands, service learning combines these three components because you have to put our heart to it, but also our hands and also our head. Those of you at the past seminar, past conference, you know, I'm quite nervous when the web shows solidarity just with the hands and the heart, as if we didn't need our head for solidarity. Service learning includes those three things. Being respectful to Pestalozzi and also to Pope Francis, that is speaking a lot about head, heart, and hands. I think that service learning also involves our feet. A few years ago, we had a program with CLAYSS that was called like the Young Step, because our youth had this clear vision that you had to go out, that you needed your feet to come out of your comfort zone, to leave the tradition and the inertia of encyclopedia, to come out of the ivory tower and the temple of knowledge. We still have a lot of schools that have been built like that, like Greek temples here. Well, we have to come out of this logic of enclosure, and we have to come out of the logic of egocentrism, of competition, that we only learn for us to be better and earn more money. No, we learn to make this a better world. And in that sense, I think that we can all agree that we are putting our head, heart, and hands at stake, and also our feet. And if we think of what we've learned throughout these 25 years, when we started talking about service learning, nobody knew what it was about. We even argued about how it should be translated, whether service learning or what. 25 years ago, we had those discussions. And in the literature that was in English at the time, the great inventor of service learning had been John Dewey, apparently, which is precisely one of the parents of service learning, with experience-based learning. What Dewey said, we had to find the types of experience that are worth having. But also in the American literature, we started to find many writers and authors that spoke about the critical service learning. Because we should not forget that Freire was exiled in the States in the 70s, and many from Freire's pedagogy had made sense and have found the meaning for service learning. And when Freire says that true education is praxis, reflection, and the action of the man over the world to transform it, I think he's talking about something that is central to service learning, because we combine theory and practice, reflection and action, and in that sense, we feel absolutely included within Dewey's definitions and also Freire's definitions. Along the years, we've heard in these conferences many specialists that brought us many other theoretical currents. I accumulated a lot of names here. It would take a whole other lecture to speak about that. But as time went by, we felt more confident that service learning was not something that we just had invented out from practice. It also had a theoretical foundation on the theory of education, psychology, the most recent research. And the year after that, when we were holding our second conference, a document was published by UNESCO. You must remember it because we quoted this a lot, that says education includes a treasure. This is the Delors report that said that the pillars of education in the 21st century involve learning to learn, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. And there we said, oh, okay, so UNESCO is saying what we are doing. And the truth is that increasingly we've realized that service learning, it has different acronyms in different languages. Service learning is a comprehensive pedagogy in this holistic sense defined by UNESCO, because in the same project, and here you can see a picture of our colleagues from Kosovo, where high school students are collaborating to improve the river banks. This is a very similar project to one we have in Mar del Plata here, so we can create some sisterhood there between Mar del Plata and Kosovo, some twinning. So they develop scientific knowledge, they learn how to be caring with the community, and they're also inclusive projects, so we're going to mention that later on. As the years went by, we've come to discover that by calling it different names or by calling it service learning, in different places of the world, we're doing exactly the same experience. I was shocked the first time I was invited to a conference in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. I had just visited the Javerian University in Colombia. We have some colleagues there from Colombia. There she is. And at the Javerian University in Cali, I had met with students and teachers of economics that had created what they call a school of little stores. You know that Cali is famous for the cartels, the drug cartels, so it was not a very friendly area. And the families had a little store, a little grocery store, greengrocers. Of course, they had protection around the store and they managed as they could. And the students of economics had created a project to teach them basic accounting so that they wouldn't lose money, basic marketing, how to display their products so they are more attractive. And when I went to Kuala Lumpur, there I saw the students of economics of the National University of Malaysia doing exactly the same project project in the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur that is a little more friendly than Cali, but not that much. So I'm amazed at seeing how all over the world there are many projects that are doing the same thing. And this is an ad. We are trying to create these twinning networks. We already have twinning between a school from Uruguay and one from Italy. They are working on heritage. Then we have schools that work with water. We've discovered that service learning is a global educational movement where from very small kids, very young kids to graduate students at university can do service learning. And the 21st century, we thought it was so far away. We imagined that we would be dressed in plastic gowns with dresses that I'm still waiting for. Everybody speaks about education for the 21st century, and we all want to be in the great innovation. But for many schools, educational innovation has to do with having classrooms, as in Finland, a lot of technology, which is great. I would love to have those pieces of furniture in all the schools, but a new trend is these pedagogies that are not that new as project-based learning that comes from the early 20th century, problem-based learning, gamification. Gradually, all these innovations have reached the schools, so much so that sometimes it seems that this is a competition to see which of these trains we jump on and which of these innovations we should be trained on. But as time went by, what we've seen is that from UNESCO to the greatest economic experts at Davos, they've come to assume this idea of the Lohr's report that says that a good education does not only include the head, it has to involve the development of competencies, and also, and I was very excited when the Global Economic Forum said at Davos that it was necessary to train on the citizen and ethic skills and to educate for civil and political commitment. We're not that far from that, at least in theory. What happens is that many of these documents tell us what are the goals we should reach, but they don't usually tell us how to do it, particularly when we do not have schools, as in Finland. By the way, everybody speaks about Finland and project-based learning there, but not many people say that Finland for 15 years now, as part of their projects, has had an annual project that has to be at the service of social needs. Don't ask me to tell you what it's called in Finnish, but these are projects that are actually service learning projects. So within this ocean of innovations, 5 years ago I showed this piece, this work of art by a Chinese artist, Yu Boling, that becomes invisible in his work. If you look in detail in that ocean of mobile phones that I don't know if they communicate us or the opposite, we see the artist. And 5 years ago we showed this picture because many of us felt like that. Within this ocean of innovations that was becoming trendy, that were saying things that we had been saying for a long time, we felt that service learning was running the risk of becoming invisible many times. So we wondered 5 years ago whether we were a global movement that was invisible. And when we were celebrating the 20th conference, in this opening lecture, I said, you know that Argentinians like this grand definitions that are not very modest, actually. So I said this: we are Finland. And actually, those that are looking for innovation should pay attention to what we are doing. I still believe that. Perhaps this is not very humble for me to say it. But the truth is that 5 years ago, it was, it was quite a grand statement. Perhaps it was too self-celebrating. But as a birthday gift for the 20th anniversary of CLAYSS and the 25th seminar, we have this translation into Spanish of a UNESCO document that was released in English and French last year, that is like the Lourdes report of this decade in the 21st century. This is called Reimagining Our Future Together, a new social contract for education. You can Google it, you can read it, because you will love it. The first thing they say, and that we've been saying, this is music for our ears, is reimagining the future together demands pedagogies that promote cooperation and solidarity. Basically, what UNESCO is saying is what we know, that in a world like the one we are in, where we have a lot of technology, but we still have absurd wars, ridiculous polarizations, and sometimes less understanding that what we had when we had less science, we need educational institutions to teach, to navigate the world of the false truths, of fake news, and teach people how to understand one another. And they say, how to learn must be determined by the why and what we learn. And this, reimagining pedagogies that promote cooperation and solidarity, necessarily requires, and listen to this, requires a participatory, collaborative learning, problem resolution, multidisciplinary, multi-generational, and intercultural. Check, check, check. Here we are. So the truth is that what UNESCO is saying, that is the education of the future, is what we've been doing, we think. One step forward, then they say, the 2030 agenda, you know that everybody wants to be in the Sustainable Development Agenda, recognizes the need of students to consider a wide range of converging approaches for the problems they are facing, and Goal 4.7 in particular says that students are global citizens that require knowledge and competencies to build sustainable futures in an increasingly interdependent world, and that the SDGs offer a framework around which we can structure an interdisciplinary learning based on problems or projects that help students develop the skills to move towards those goals. Here, this is another check. We did it before the UNESCO document, because here we have Aranzazu, one of the authors of the book, with many from the Ibero-American Network of Service Learning, and last year they published a book on service learning and the SDGs, or the Millennium Development Goals. You can Google it, it's an electronic format, you don't need to go to Spain to buy it. So the UNESCO is saying that we need to consider Sustainable Development Goals. And the truth is that when I see the SDGs, this is what I see. Thousands of projects that are already in progress. No SDG doesn't have at least one or two projects dealing with it. And sometimes there are projects like here from Mar del Plata that have several projects, and several goals are involved, several SDGs, because they take care of the quality of the water, but also quality education. They're protecting the health of the community, but they're also contributing to alleviating the effects of climate change. So it seems to me, well, if you want to listen to the experience of this school, today the school is going to present their project at panel 4. I think that we can all rethink our projects based on the Sustainable Development Goals, and I promise the team that next year we will be working on SDGs, but this year we are celebrating. So UNESCO says what we know already, that the problems of the world are complex and that to solve them, just one discipline is not enough. University students know that. It says the world has problems and the university has departments and the school has subjects. But the schools that do service learning have been known for a long time, just as universities, that to deal with complex problems, you have to put different disciplines at stake. This is a rural elementary school from Uruguay that created this graph with the teacher. In each subject, what they were supposed to do to protect the quality of the water. So you see that in all the areas, they are helping preserve the water. And going back to the UNESCO document, this is the birthday present for you. We said we were Finland, we were the education of the future, and what the UNESCO says is that in order to overcome that format of the encyclopedia format of the class, for the education of the future, they recommend 3 methodologies, 3 approaches to education. And those educational approaches based on problems and projects, that's the one we know, the project-based learning that is very popular and has a lot of experts. Pedagogy is based on research and on research action. Participatory pedagogy is one of the pillars of the Latin American, African, and in many other areas of the world education systems. And pedagogies, the community-engaged pedagogies and service learning. This is the first time that UNESCO mentions as service learning. So they say, our pedagogies can give learning a strong sense of usefulness or purpose, a sense of purpose, if they are conducted from a humble position. Now we're going back to that. But basically they're saying what we said in previous conferences, that actually service learning articulates both project-based learning and participatory research and as engaged participation. The difference is that we can do project-based learning only in the classroom, and it can be fantastic projects, but it's teachers and students. And there can be beautiful research action projects, but it's only the researcher and the community. But to be service learning, it needs to have the 3 players, the 3 key actors, students, teachers, and the community. So we thank UNESCO, and what they say is service learning alleviates and removes those walls between the classroom and the community, challenge the assumption of the students and connect them with system processes and experiences that are wider than their own experiences. There you can see some pictures of some of the thousands of service learning projects presented at this conference, because it seems to me that we know this from experience. How much we learn on the ground, that you cannot learn just by staying in the classroom, and how at some moment that line is blurred as to where we are learning, whether in the classroom or in the field. And UNESCO, for our surprise, says something that when we added solidarity to service, that was one of the things we want to emphasize. UNESCO says it's vital for students these things happen, the little cables. It's vital for students to approach the service with a spirit of humbleness and free of paternalism, particularly to people that may be facing different challenges. Can I ask the technical team to help us with this? Imagine you are looking at the picture of the medicine students in Venezuela that are going to work. They go to Amazonia and they have to visit those indigenous communities with humbleness, respecting the customs of each ethnic group as to how you should approach the body, the respect that you should show. And they're humble enough to go into the houses with the shaman, the wizard, as we call them in the Western world. So they go with the local doctors and they learn from the local doctors about the herbs they use. Exactly. There you can see the Venezuelan students. I loved it that UNESCO says this, that we've been saying for such a long time. Charity is not the same as solidarity. Justice, looking for justice, is not the same that to look for your peace of mind. And paternalism is not the same as fraternity. Another thing that UNESCO says, and that has been obvious for us throughout these 25 years, is that service learning is not something that should only be done by those that are privileged. In some countries, it's thought that service learning is what those that have something to donate are doing. But we know that all students can contribute to the well-being of their communities. And that service learning has the potential, listen to this because it is a very well drafted, the potential of attracting solidarity as a core principle to the pedagogies that solve problems, instead of favoring those solutions that are just the most convenient. Because sometimes we are well intended, but we do problem-based learning and we offer solutions that we think are beautiful, but not necessarily show solidarity or caring with the community. So these are just 3 pictures, but we've seen children and teenagers with physical disabilities, mental disabilities. We've seen the youth in prisons, in maximum security cells, also doing service learning. We've seen schools that sometimes we call little schools here from the capital city, but they're fantastic schools that do wonderful projects to improve the food, the daily life, the environment of their communities. We know that nobody is as small, as poor, or as special, so as not to have something to offer to their community. So now going into the final part of the presentation, because then we are going to have some time for questions. We are running the risk of perhaps this being a trend, and we start, having interviews and appearing in the pedagogical journals, but also running the risk of trivializing it. And we are seeing some contexts where we call anything as service learning. So I think it's important to keep being rigorous about the essential characteristics of a good service learning project. The second risk is what we call to sleep on the laurels. That means being just quiet. Well, if UNESCO says that service learning is good, that's it. There's nothing else to be done. But there are still a lot of people that do not know what it's about. I still have colleagues that are surprised when they hear that a law that was passed 12 years ago mentions service learning. You say, really, service learning is in the law? It is. So we still have to do much more to disseminate service learning, so not to rest on the laurels. And finally, I think we should not forget what we learned from the pioneers, from those who started when nobody knew about it, when nobody knew what it was about, when there was no money, when there were no funds, neither private nor government funds. But they started on service learning because they realized that it was the best way way to educate their children. I chose these three pictures on purpose. Apologies, the gentleman here, I did not respect the gender quota, but I loved those three smiles of teenagers, girls that are harvesting what they planted, not for them, but for their communities. They planted, they grew that to reforest a national park that went on fire. They planted to offer an organic garden to their neighbors. They planted vegetables to change the feeding styles in a very small village in the north. These three teenagers are happy of doing what they're doing. And I think that for any teacher, there's no better gift than seeing their students feeling happy of being in school and that they have found in service learning the caring meaning of life. So well, we have no more time. I'm just going to finish with this quote. This is what we used to say at the beginning of all the presentations when we created CLAYSS amid the crisis. A writer from Chaco in the north of Argentina used to say at that time, when everything is falling down, you can adopt three attitudes. One is to contemplate the disaster and look in awe how everything is coming down. Another one is to flee, to remove your body so as not to be crushed by the debris. And the other one is to recover immediately, to evaluate the damage, and to rebuild immediately. 20 years later, we are still, well, hopefully at the end of the pandemic, we are still seeing a lot of collapses and disasters. Yesterday, we heard our colleague from Ukraine. Is she here? Hola?
Can you stand up? Okay, justo la perdí ahora o está perdida la traducción.
Perhaps she's not here. So yesterday we were with our colleague from Ukraine, our colleague from Palestine. Yes, he's here, if you can stand up. There are so many disasters, not only the pandemic, so much war, injustice, so many border situations all over the world. And when we see those disasters, we can be paralyzed, or we can try and escape, or we can do what we do with service learning, to put our sleeves up and rebuild immediately.
All right. Thank you, Nieves, for the inspiration, for sharing so much history and knowledge, for showing us the history of the institution with pedagogical references, bringing up questions that are so important today as a society and as individuals in this world. Along the same lines, we have a few questions, and we still have a few minutes left. We are planning to have a break at 11:10, so we have time for a few questions. So if you have any questions, please write them down, and we will take it. The first question to Nieves is the following. Do you recall in particular any service learning experience that has had a significant impact on you? You have traveled the world, you have mentioned a lot of projects already, but is there any experience that you would like to highlight here, to raise here? I must say that I learned and I got to know service learning thanks to a scholarship in the United States. I met one of the founders of the North American Service Learning, two founders actually, that provided me with a lot of bibliography, and I learned from the bibliography. But I actually learned what service learning was about when I encountered teachers and schools that were in fact practicing service learning, and I owe them a lot. I think that the team already knows who I'm going to mention, because if I have to talk about one experience, is that of Master Jose. Many people know about this because Master Jose, teacher Jose, has just retired. He has attended many conferences. Jose was a young teacher in charge of Green Garden in his province in Jujuy. As part of the curriculum, he has a mandatory slot for Green Garden. But the Green Garden was in a little village in the north of the country, in a desert area where you can have a huge fluctuation of temperature between day and night, and you have a small group of shepherds. The closest grocery store was just 40 kilometers away, so all the children were fed on potato, sweet potato, goat meat or beef when it was a celebration. So Jose was appointed the teacher in charge of the Green Garden for that school. So he's told that since you cannot have a Green Garden in a desert area, the previous teachers were teaching maths. So he starts working with his primary students in a shelter school where students would live for 1 week in the school and they would go back home for another week. So he tells them that his ancestors from the Goya, the Inca community, had been able to produce vegetables under those circumstances. And they set up the first Andean greenhouse of the school. They started by changing the eating habits in the school. Then the family started having their own family greenhouses, so they also changed the eating habits in the families. And when they were awarded the presidential award in 2005 because they improved the eating and the food system of the entire community, he told me that they were going to use the money of the prize to make a bigger greenhouse, to plant trees, and also to make sure that they would have an oasis in the middle of the desert. And let me confess that in my inner self I said, perhaps this is too ambitious, but I didn't say a word. Fortunately, I didn't say a word, because years later, teacher Jose sent me a picture from the mountain where you can clearly see a green spot in the desert. If you visit their Facebook, Cangrejillos, the Garden of the Puna, of the desert, that is the name of the page. And they were able to do that through an interdisciplinary project with children between the ages of 5 and 12 in a rural school where they lack everything except the will to make a change. Let me remind you that if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we will collect your questions. One more question, Nieves. You talked about these three components in service learning, the student leadership, solving a problem with the community, and the connection with the curriculum. Which is the most difficult component to deal with, which has proven to be more conflicting? And what hints you could give us, what tips you could give us based on your experience? I think that the answer depends on the tradition of each educational institution. There are some schools and universities that have have a long solidarity tradition. So perhaps what is more difficult for them is to go across the other side with different subjects. So perhaps it is difficult for them to establish that connection with the curriculum. There are sometimes schools and universities with a long scientific tradition. So in their case, they need to find out who can benefit from the knowledge they have, how they can contribute to an improvement in society. Sometimes that step is easily taken because there are only a few schools of law that do not offer free of charge legal advice. But in other cases, like in the case of nanotechnology, I wouldn't have thought that they could have a service learning project, or that there would be a subject called pavements in civil engineering that could come up with a service learning project. However, in Cali, that subject did some research into the formulas used by the city government for paving their streets. They had copied a model from New York, but it was not suitable for the climate of Cali, so they had to renovate and to repair the pavement every 6 months. They were not using the proper formula. With the project, they discovered that. So I think that we have plenty of proof that you can do service learning with any subject. In any service learning experience, you can find the relationship with the other components. But what we cannot replace is students' leadership, because teachers have not been trained to trust their students. Years ago, we carried out a quantitative research to see how many schools had submitted their projects for the presidential awards. We analyzed 1,200 cases, and we found that there was no objective characteristic in them that prevented them from doing service learning. You had large, small schools, urban, rural schools, all kinds of schools. But from a qualitative standpoint, we realized that it is essential to have teachers who actually believe that their students can do great things. When the trust exists, when teachers trust their students, when we dare to come down from our university position and we dare to learn together with our students on the ground, it is there where we can have quality service learning. One more question for you from Neuquén, in the south of the country. Working with the community and not for the community. In our province, we can implement the first curricular design for secondary schools under the paradigm of good living. And we see that as a right. How can we define what we term problem? I imagine that this may refer to who determines what the problem is. Nieves. A few years ago in Ecuador, the summa causae, the idea of good living, was put at the center of educational policy. This is the concept of the Andean indigenous peoples, the idea of living in peace with nature, with our ecosystem. And I'm saying this because some people might not know what this is about when we talk about the good living in Latin America. I think that with this paradigm of the indigenous peoples to be in harmony with the cosmos and with other individuals, when we are lacking in harmony is where we find problems. And I think that defining the problem that we are going to address is important. In Neuquén and in Kuala Lumpur, this means striking some balance, because in service learning projects, we do not have a project of the Social Development Ministry. It is an educational project, so we need to strike a balance. We need to identify the problem and the problem that is affecting the community, that our students will learn from and will also find inspiration in. Because if we just define the problem with the community, we run the risk of having students that just feel that they are being used as cheap labor to address a community problem. We need to give voice to our students, even if they are 5 years old, so that they can choose among problems, because usually communities do not just have one single problem. So the community has to raise their problems, but it is the students who have to raise their voices and choose the problems they are going to work on. Question. I believe that this comes from a school in Junín de los Andes in Neuquén, so they send you their greetings. Nieves. That is one of my favorite experiences. Question. What are the abilities and skills that we need to take into account and we need to acquire in order to carry out a solidarity-based service learning project? Nieves. I think that in a service learning project, the first aspect teachers need to think about is, according to the age of our students, according to their level of development, according to the contents they are learning, what are the competencies and knowledge they should have. It is not the same for us to work with students of engineering or medicine than to work with kindergarten children or with students in the last year of the secondary school. It is not that service learning looks for other competencies than what is sought for in quality education. We need to develop the skills and competencies associated with the professional profile if we are at the university, the so-called soft skills. If we are working with kindergarten, we just need to develop the basic skills of childhood. It's not that we have specific skills or competencies associated to service learning projects, but it is true that depending on the project we choose, some competencies will develop more than others. There are some projects that are closely related to natural sciences or to hard sciences, so they will work a lot on the logical and mathematical-oriented reasoning, but also we have to work on empathy. So it will depend on the project and the developmental stage. Some other questions. What is the national law that promotes service learning? And do you think that the curricular design should be revisited and reformulated? Nieves. The national education law, I can't remember the number, 26/260, that is the number. Thank you. The National Education Act contains several provisions referring to education in solidarity. I think there is one of the sections, Article 32, thank you, Sergio, refers to service-oriented educational projects, and there is another article referring specifically to service learning. This is a law that provides guarantees. That means that the state guarantees that the principles embedded in that law can be implemented in any educational institution. Out of respect for university autonomy, there is no law for higher education that forces institutions to do service learning, because that would go against their autonomy as universities. But the truth is that almost all public universities have some mandatory or optional requirements for students to engage in service learning. The curriculum now. Well, the truth is that we don't need to reformulate the curriculum to do service learning, because as we have said, you can do service learning in connection with any subject. And sometimes in the curriculum you may have a subject called service learning, and that poses a risk because that may mean that the other teachers would just continue with their classes giving some vague principles of service learning but not doing anything meaningful. Those of you who know me well know that I have been in the ministry for many years and I never pushed for having a subject called service learning, but I always pushed for having the pedagogy of service learning in schools. What we have today in Argentina, and this is optional for each institution, is that secondary schools have a document available from the Federal Education Council that recommends schools to offer at least once in the school path in the secondary school a project where the whole class can participate, and for that class it should be mandatory. And these are called solidarity-based social community projects. The ministry has funded and supported these solidarity-based social community projects. I think that based on the Latin American experience, overall, countries that have a mandatory requirement for service learning have faced several difficulties to prevent students from feeling a burden with that mandatory requirement instead of a stimulus. So I think that it is better to promote the pedagogy, the training of teachers in this methodology, but that they can be carried out in any subject. Moderator, thank you, Maria Nieves. Thank you to all of you for listening. We encourage you to keep on asking questions because we will find answers to your questions. And now there will be some announcements for the activity. Thank you, Maria Nieves. Let me share with you this phrase that we had in one of the seminars, and now we see that this is coming true. Now we would invite you to have a break until 30 past. We will offer coffee in the foyer. Please take care of your belongings. And remember, we have the booth of our sponsors.